All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today, and welcome to Policy Palooza Part 2. My name is Abby Cohen, and I'm the Director of Partnerships here at DC Public Schools. Today's session is being recorded, and we will also, as always, share a copy of the deck and the recording from both yesterday's Part 1 training and today's training early next week. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. Please feel free to put any questions that you have in the Q&A box. The chat is disabled, but the Q&A should be working. And we will try to answer as we go, but have saved time at the end for a dedicated Q&A time. So feel free to drop questions as we go, and they will get answered. If there's something we can't answer today, we will make sure to follow up with you over email. Closed captioning is also available for today's session under the More menu at the top of your screen. It's listed under language and speech. So this is our agenda for today. We're going to start with a quick review of the objectives for our training, introduce you, anyone who we haven't met with before, to the DCPS Partnerships team, and then we'll spend the bulk of our time talking through the school program provider requirements, both for coming on as a new partner, but then also operational requirements for once you're actively working in our schools. At the end, we'll share a review of our key resources and systems, as well as our contact information so that you know how to reach us. And then we'll close out with our Q&A. So the main objective for today's session is to ensure that our partners have a strong understanding of the operational requirements for being a DCPS partner. These are the processes that we expect all of our partners to follow and implement while serving our students. And while we'll do a quick review at the beginning of the onboarding requirements, which we covered yesterday, the focus of today's conversation really is those operational requirements that you need to be tracking and utilizing once you have begun programming with a school or schools within DCPS. We are going to cover a lot today, but we have designed the deck to be a resource for you so that you can reference it as needed throughout the school year. We really want to think about this like a handbook, and we hope that it's something that you'll refer to over the course of the year when questions come up. So next, just a quick review of our team. As I mentioned, I'm Abby. I lead the DCPS Partnerships team, which includes my teammate, Katie Williams, who's our manager of partnerships, as well as our Chief, Kira Tyler, who leads our broader Office of External Affairs. Chief Tyler is joining us this morning, and so I'm happy to pass it to her to share a few words.
Thanks, Abby, and hello to all of our partners. I'm super excited for you all to join us, coming together to learn about a really amazing school year 2026-2027 that we have planned for our students. And with your support, we're really excited to set up some really enriching programs. We're grateful to all of you. So I just wanted to stop in and hear the presentation myself. I know Abby, Katie, and Sadie work really, really hard throughout the school year and in the summer to prepare for your success as partners and your contribution to all that we do, including our strategic plan. Many of you may know that we have great plans for our partners. We are on a 5-year trajectory, I'll call it, to improve our students' connection to their schools, and we couldn't do that without our partners. So we're really grateful for you for being here, for taking the time out to learn about how we can be in alignment for this next school year. We have a lot of things that have stayed the same, but a lot of improvements that have been made to make these partnerships easier and better for the sake of our students. So again, thank you all for being here, and I'll pass it over to Katie.
Thanks, Kira. Good afternoon, everyone. So to start us off, I'm going to do a quick review of our onboarding requirements for partners. These are the pieces that must be in place before programming can begin. During part 1 of our training, which we did yesterday, we dove into each one of these in more details than I'm going to do here today. So if you were unable to attend part 1 yesterday, a recording will be available. So our team primarily manages a subset of partners called school program providers, or SPPs. These are organizations that provide their own programming to DCPS students, work with students 3 or more times per school year, are not health or mental health providers. Those providers should complete a separate application process through the school mental health and health services team. Examples of SPPs include programs like tutoring programs, mentoring, aftercare providers, dance class providers, and general enrichment programming. SPPs would not include organizations offering only field trip opportunities, volunteer groups coming in under DCPS-led programming, dental health providers, or curriculum vendors as some examples. Because our SPPs do work so closely with DCPS and our students, there are policies and procedures that they must follow to protect themselves, our students, and the district. This is an overview of the 6 main requirements for SPPs. I'm going to focus primarily today on requirements 4 and 5 regarding clearances and building use agreements. If you do have questions about the other requirements, I encourage you again to review the recording of yesterday's Part 1 training. So if you're a returning partner, you should already be registered and familiar with our DCPS Partnerships database. This is the first step to becoming an SPP, and it's how your organization shares information with schools about your programming. Please stay tuned for an email that's coming later this month with the instructions on completing your annual registration reconfirmation. This will ensure that your profile stays active in our system. So registering as an SPP in our database does not give you the green light to, automatically begin programming, and it also doesn't guarantee a placement in our schools. So here's some tips that you can review if you haven't already identified a school or central services program to partner with. These are also available on our website linked here. So as I mentioned, in addition to being registered as an SPP, all SPPs must also have an official DCPS agreement in place before services can begin. The type of agreement that you receive depends on whether or not you charge DCPS directly for services. So if you're not charging a school directly, you can check the DCPS Partnerships database to see whether you have a memorandum of agreement or an MOA on file with its expiration date. If you do charge DCPS for services, you will need a purchase order or a PO. That's with the individual school you're working with. You can check the DC vendor portal or contact your school or central services point of contact for confirmation of your purchase order. Services cannot be rendered until the PO is executed. I want to emphasize how important it is to have this formal agreement in place before services begin. If DCPS does become aware of organizations operating that do not have an agreement in place, programming could be paused while the agreement is executed. And this is particularly important because agreements take quite a long time to execute. We estimate that they take upwards of 90 days to finalize, so it is critical that you begin that process as soon as possible. If your MOA is approaching expiration, we will send out communication in advance to remind you to begin your renewal process. I've already sent out some communication to partners this year. We have several that are going through their renewals now. It is important to note that principals cannot sign agreements with school program providers. An agreement will not be considered valid unless it's an MOA that's signed by the DCPS chancellor or a purchase order or contract that's issued by the contracting officer. Even more critical is that all partner staff and volunteers go through our DCPS clearance process. So DCPS requires all individuals providing services, whether that's in person or virtually, to complete the DCPS clearance process prior to providing services. These clearances are valid for 2 years, and we do not accept clearances from any other entity or organization. So if you receive a different a government agency grant, you still need to go through the DCPS clearance process before services can begin. This is an overview of the clearance requirements for both volunteers and contractors. The main difference here is the drug test. This is a requirement for contractors, but not for volunteers. And the way that we distinguish that is contractors are individuals that are paid for their services. Now that can be paid directly by DCPS or paid by the partner organization, while volunteers are completely unpaid. I again want to emphasize the importance of having a process in place to confirm your staff and volunteer clearances. As outlined in your partnership agreement, it is the obligation of partners to confirm their staff and volunteers clearance status, either by collecting their official DCPS clearance letters or confirming with our DCPS clearance team, not just taking people's word for it. It is the focus of the district this year to ensure partner compliance with this requirement, and failure to enforce this requirement could result in program disruptions or MOA termination. So if you have any additional questions about the clearance process or need access to the clearance application, you can visit our website, and at the end of this presentation, we'll provide our contact information in addition to the clearance team's contact information. So next is building use agreements. This is for any provider who is operating in a DCPS building outside of regular school hours. That refers to hours outside of the school's instructional hours. This can vary school to school, so please check with your school on what those hours are. So if you're operating before school, after school, times the school's on break, during the weekends, you must work with your school and the realty office at the Department of General Services to submit an application to use facilities. Those applications are signed by the principal and should be submitted at least 20 days prior to the start of programming. I do want to note, I know we're approaching the end of summer now, but when it comes times for next summer, that lead time is extended. So please stay tuned for or be alert of communication about that as we're approaching next summer. We have some exciting updates about the building use agreement process this year. So by popular demand, DGS is making efforts to digitize the BUA process. Phase 1 of that is a fillable digital PDF and online payments. Also new this year is that if you are regularly needing field space during after school hours, you no longer indicate that on your building use agreement application and must submit a separate field use permit application via RecTrack. After school partners are not competing for permits or space for operations before 6 p.m. However, this process update is to ensure that there's better tracking of facility usage across our schools. So partners who have previously secured a BUA with DGS should already have a RecTrack account created and will just need to create their credentials. If you do have questions about that, you can email the DCPS permits team. Their emails listed here, just permits.dcps@k12.dc.gov. This is a phased approach to eventually transition all building and field use reservation to the online RecTrack program. So here's an overview of all the requirements that we just reviewed, including where you can find more information and the best point of contact for each step. More details on each of these steps are available on our website, as is the part 1 of this training. I'm going to leave this screen up for just a few seconds if anyone wants to take a screenshot. However, as we mentioned, this deck and a recording will be available.
Kate, I just want to highlight one other thing from the last slide, which is that payments for building use agreements and field use are now going to be online as well, also through RecTrack. So very exciting that now we can use electronic payment to pay any applicable fees for both the BUA and the field use permit.
Thank you. Great. Okay, so I'm going to dive into DCPS's operational policies and procedures now. We're going to cover 3 areas today. One is student safety, the second is equitable access to programming, and then we'll cover some other items like events and data requests. So starting off with student safety, we have a new elementary student dismissal guidelines. So in alignment with these DCPS new dismissal guidelines, please be advised of new guidance for partners regarding the dismissal of elementary school students. So students in preschool should be picked up by a parent or authorized adult and may not be released to another elementary aged student. In alignment with the AAP and other student safety experts, DCPS does not recommend that students in grades K through 3 self-dismiss alone. DCPS defines self-dismissal either a student leaving school grounds on their own or being dismissed to an older sibling. If you allow students in grades K through 5 to self-dismiss, you must have a parent permission form on file. Another important reminder is about mandated reporter training. So as people in programs that work with students, we are all mandated reporters. As such, all program staff must take DC Child and Family Services Agency's virtual training. We also strongly recommend that volunteers complete this training. This training should be completed annually and can be found on the CFSA website. So what are we mandated to report? I won't go through this whole list, but as a mandated reporter, it is not our job to decide whether an accusation is legitimate. Our job is to report any instance of suspected or reported neglect or abuse. And then the professionals at CFSA and MPD can take over their investigation. You cannot get in trouble for making a good faith report. This is a critical safeguard to ensure our students get the supports that they need. So on the screen, you'll see a list of the types of incidents that should be reported, from mental injury, physical abuse, physical assault, neglect, sexual abuse, and more. The training will go into each of these in detail and the full process when you complete it. So in addition to the mandated reporter protocol, it is also critical that we as the partnerships team have documentation of any incidents that occur regarding the behavior, safety, or health of any DCPS student or provider personnel. This ensures that the proper protocols are followed and that students, families, and staff receive the communications and supports that they need. We have had instances where a grievance might be filed several weeks or months later, and having this proper documentation helps us effectively respond to those instances. So the first step, if something happens with involving suspected abuse or neglect of a child, is to immediately report that to CFSA and MPD, as we went over in the previous slide. We also ask that you alert your school-based point of contact and then submit a report to our DCPS Partnerships Incident Reporting form. So what kind of incidences do we report? We get questions about this a lot. This guidance is the same guidance that schools receive, so we do hope that it helps align programs or how schools approach incidents when they happen during the school day. I want to emphasize that this is not an exhaustive list, but provides clarity on how we think about incidents of different levels of severity. So Tier 1 incidents, we expect immediate reporting, first to MPD and or fire EMS if it's an emergency, and then you should notify your school principal and our DCPS partnerships team. For Tier 2 incidents, we expect those to be reported within 24 to 48 hours, and you should follow the steps outlined in the previous slide and fill out our incident reporting form. This is a screenshot of what the DCPS incident report looks like. You'll be asked to fill out some basic details about the incident, and if further information or discussion is needed, we will follow up with your organization. We also received several questions about the intersection between discipline policies and special education accommodations. So school program providers are expected to have a written discipline policy that is shared with families. These same behavior expectations and discipline procedures may apply to students with IEPs, Section 504 plans, or with a suspected disability. However, reasonable accommodations must be implemented. So we do have a DCPS Partnerships accommodations request process, which must be exhausted before a student can be permanently removed from the program. Any incidents that initiate the program's discipline policy must be reported to the partnerships team via our incident reporting process. And if a student is permanently removed from your program one school year, they must have the opportunity to rejoin the program in the following school year. Abby is going to go over the accommodation request process a little bit later in this presentation. So on to field trips now. Just a reminder of our DCPS field trip policy that we have linked here. A few highlights that I want to emphasize is that this policy applies to DCPS sponsored field trips. That means that this is a trip that is planned in any part by DCPS employee acting in their DCPS capacity or during their DCPS tour of duty. This also can include trips that take place during the school day, or a trip that is funded in any way by DCPS or money donated directly to DCPS or collected by DCPS students. If the trip is DCPS sponsored, the school must put it through the DCPS field trip application, which will kickstart the approval process. DCPS partners must continue to follow the field trip requirements outlined in their DCPS Memorandum of Agreement, whether it's DCPS sponsored or not, when planning any field trip. We do often get questions too about whether DCPS employees can plan a non-DCPS sponsored field trip. That answer is yes, but there's a certain process that they need to follow, and that is outlined on page 9 of that field trip policy. For DCPS sponsored trips, here is an overview of the approval process. So depending on how far away the trip is, there are some different levels of approval. Leave this up here for a second. Regarding our student transportation policy, so students may never be transported in the following types of vehicles or modes of transportation for DCPS sponsored field trips. That includes personal vehicles that are operated by DCPS or partner staff, 15 passenger vans, ride sharing services like Uber or Lyft, and parents' personal vehicles. That includes if they are their child or other students. For non-DCPS sponsored field trips, partners must include the mode of transportation or the company that's transporting students being used in their field trip consent form so that families have those details at the time of signing. Please ensure that the transportation company that you're working with are vetted. That includes drivers having background checks and the company has the appropriate business license. And then, as I mentioned before, please continue to follow the field trip requirements that are outlined in your MOA. So lastly, in our student safety portion of this presentation is our elevated risk policy. As a district, we want to ensure that students have access to joyful learning experiences, but also need to ensure that students are safe and not engaging in risky activities. So that's what this policy speaks to. For any event that's hosted on DCPS property, inflatable attractions that students can jump or climb on are not permitted under any circumstance. This includes, but is not limited to, bounce houses and obstacle courses. Inflatable attractions that students do not jump or climb on, like an inflatable basketball setup, are permitted, provided they comply with the insurance requirements outlined in the policy. The last bullet shares a few examples of the process for obtaining any of the permitted elevator risk attractions, and I encourage you to review the full policy for more details. I'm now going to turn it over to Abby to discuss other key processes and requirements for partners.
Thanks, Katie. I'm going to talk through some of the requirements under our equitable program access section. So the first one that Katie spoke to a little bit earlier is our before and after school accommodation request process. So any student with a qualified disability must be afforded an equal opportunity to participate in extracurricular activities and athletics as their non-disabled peers. And so while we do not expect, or there's no requirement that the entirety of a student's 504 plan or IEP be implemented during extracurricular activities, students have a right to receive any reasonable accommodation that they need in order to participate in DCPS run or DCPS sponsored extracurricular activities, provided that the accommodation does not substantially alter the program or provide undue hardship. So if you have a student who is interested in enrolling in your program or is currently in the program, and the school has indicated a need for an accommodation, the family has indicated a need, or your staff, this next slide will outline the steps you need to take in order to submit that request. So the first step is that you will access the accommodation request form in the partnerships database. You don't have to be logged in order to access this. You fill it out, providing the requested information about the organization and the details of the student's needs. And then my team, once you submit it, will receive it, we'll review it, and we'll follow up to schedule a meeting with you and your team, the school team, and other relevant teams within central services. That usually includes our general counsel's office, our department, and our Department of Specialized Instruction. So this is a screenshot. It looks pretty similar to the incident reporting form, but it's very straightforward and should not take too long to fill out so that we have the information we need to get started. Related is the administration of medication. So administering medication for a qualifying student is considered a reasonable accommodation that must be provided. Staff cannot administer medication to minors without completing DC Health's administration of medication or AOM training. So if a qualifying student needs support taking medication, is interested or enrolled in your program, please reach out to the DCPS partnerships team. Our contact information will be shared at the end of the presentation, and we'll make sure to get you registered for the next AOM training. Those will start in the fall. For language access, we serve a really diverse population of students here at DCPS, and we're committed to making sure that they have access to information in a language that they understand to, again, make sure that they have equitable access to our programming. So any organization that contracts with the district and interacts with the public is required to comply with the DC Language Access Act. And we've linked here, as well as listed resources and best practices from our language acquisition division if you have questions about how you can improve your language accessibility. One really important helpful tool is the language line. So our language access unit supports partners' interpretation needs through the language line, which is a free contracted service that offers telephonic interpretation in over 240 languages. It's a really incredible tool to have access to. And so we've listed out the steps to use it. And if you have questions, please reach out. On the next slide, you'll see our colleague Claudette Monroy's contact information listed. She's with our language access unit. She can answer any questions about language line or other supports that you might need when it comes to translation and interpretation. All right, our last section, thank you for sticking with us, covers planning an event in working with media, as well as non-research data requests. So if you are planning an event at our school with our students, these are the requirements we have to make sure that, first of all, we know when folks from outside of our schools will be on campus and working with our students, but also help us support and amplify the great work of our partners in our schools. So if you are hosting an event that's going to include external guests, media, elected officials, or other VIP visitors, as soon as you start thinking about this event, please reach out to the DCPS partnerships team. Please reach out to us because it is our office, the Office of External Affairs, that will ultimately provide approval for the event. And then, as I mentioned before, we often do lean into support coordination that elevates and amplifies the great work that's going on and the event itself. If you would like media to attend or cover an event, again, first, before any outreach is done, make sure to contact our team. Media must be chaperoned by a member of the DCPS press team. So it's really imperative that we are closely involved in the coordination so we can make sure they're available and able to support. Any media announcements or invitations also need to be approved before they're published or distributed. And the DCPS press team will work really closely with the school administration to make sure there's a plan in place to designate students that don't have a DCPS media release, and families should never be asked to sign something separate from what DCPS already has them sign during the enrollment process. If sort of separate from your own operations, you were ever to observe media on site during programming at your school, you can also contact us so we can figure out what's going on. And this also applies to media pieces that maybe are not being filmed on DCPS property, but they're involving DCPS student interviews. Those also do need to be flagged for our team so we can, again, make sure that our press team is appropriately involved. And a quick note on our DCPS media consent form. This is something that all families have the opportunity to sign when they enroll at the beginning of the school year. And it does extend to include our partners. So any partner that wishes to photograph or record a DCPS student as part of their program must ensure that the student has a signed DCPS media consent form on file with the school. So the school has access to that information and can pull a list of who does and does not have that media release on file. But again, that's why you would flag this for our team so we can flag it for our press team and they can work with the school to make sure only students with that signed release are photographed or recorded. And with a signed DCPS media consent form, partners can use student media in their program's promotional materials, so long as the student media being used does not disclose any of the student's biographical or identifying personal information. And last but definitely not least are non-research data requests. We get requests from partners pretty frequently for student data. And so as long as it's not related to formal research operations, this is the process that you would follow in order to get the data. So you need to have a current FERPA release form for each student whose data you are requesting. On the DCPS Partnerships website, we have the most up-to-date form that you can translate it into several languages. So definitely, if you don't have one, that is the one to use. We know that it meets all of the federal requirements. You would also include a description of the data you're requesting and how it's going to be used. And then you'd also include an Excel spreadsheet. Please do not use a Google Doc. We cannot always access it, so it's much easier if it's a standalone Excel spreadsheet. And that Excel spreadsheet would need to have the following information. So on column A, you have the student name, the student ID, if you have it, the student's current school or previous school that you're requesting data about, and then one column for each additional piece of data you're requesting. So maybe it's, Q1 math, Q2 math, however many pieces of data that you're requesting would go, in a separate column. So you would package all that together, send it to the partnerships team. I review every single FERPA form in detail. You can ask some fellow partners who are on the meeting today. I really do look at everything. And sometimes we cannot accept the form if the names don't match, if it's not signed, if it's not within the year from when the form was originally signed. So if you have questions about this process, please feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to walk you through it and sort of let you know what are the things we're looking for, what makes a FERPA form valid, et cetera. So we're just to close us out, wanted to share a quick review of our systems and resources that you can access. So here you'll have a link to the DCPS Partnerships website. This is a really robust resource that we've developed that houses all of this information in what we think is a pretty easy to navigate format. It also has lots of resources, as you can see on the bottom right corner, a specific page with resources, which is access to our historic trainings, resources like the School Partnerships Toolkit, which is a really great resource. It's, I think, 4 to 5 topical one-pagers that address common pain points that we hear from both schools and partners when it comes to working together, and provides best practices both on the school side and the partner side for how to navigate those potential issues. We will also on the resources page have a link to the School Partnerships database. Everyone on the call should be very familiar with the database at this point, but each partner has a profile in the database. It's where you keep all of your program data up to date. It's where you describe the type of programming that you offer, and it's also viewable to our school. So it's a great opportunity. It's another reason why you want to make sure to keep it updated, is so that when schools are looking through it, they have an accurate picture of what you offer, and if you're looking for a new school partner. So before we go into our Q&A, want to share first an exit ticket that we're asking folks to complete, just to give us a little bit of feedback and also confirm who was able to participate today. So we'll leave that up on the screen, and then before we close out, we'll share our contact information as well. So with that, I will look at the Q&A. See what questions we have. So I see a question about the student discipline policy, if it needs to be created, if all programming takes place in a classroom or assembly style in the auditorium. So I presume this question is specific to programming that's happening during the school day, which would be governed by school day policies. But if I'm not understanding that question correctly, let me know. I would also say it might depend on whether or not you are if you are being like if DCPS staff is involved in the program. So it's not like a pull-out program where you're sort of separately running something during the school day, but it's really integrated within the classroom. So if you have more specific questions, you can reach out. Question about making calls to CFSA. Because you don't always have the information they need. Yes, you as a mandated reporter, you have to call and make that report and do your best to have the information that CFSA needs in order to follow up on the report that's being made. But yes, it is not only preferable but required that the report go through. A question
So,
about,
Abby,
oh,
sorry,
yeah,
I
go
wanted to
ahead.
add on to the CFSA call. So you have a limited amount of time to make that call. And so if you need to collect that information from the school or make the call with the school, like with that information, you are welcome to do so. This is not a situation where, you know, you call like in the moment or in front of a student. Like, you do have some time to get yourself together and make that call. So as a mandated reporter, when you go through the mandated reporter training, it will share the actual timeline that you have, but there is time to gather that information.
I see a question here about transportation vendors for field trips. That list is available to schools. It is updated whenever new transportation vendors have been cleared by our Office of Risk Management and approved by DCPS. However, that is a school-facing or internal-facing resource. But if you reach out to us, we'd be able to provide that.
Katie, can you go back to the field use or the BUA update slide? There's a question about the RecTrack request process. So next week, when we send out the recordings from today and yesterday's trainings, we'll also include this information about the updates to the BUA process, which includes links to this DGS page, which outlines everything that's being updated. There, something that is a little bit different with the field use request, whereas the BUA has a general guideline of, or DGS Realty has a general guideline that BUA applications need to be submitted at least 20 business days before programming begins. Field permits have actual windows when you submit the request. So the fall window, there was a fall window that closed about a week ago, but there's going to be another late permit window for fall 2026 in early August, and that runs from August 3rd through August 10th. So you need to submit that request within that window. And if you have questions about the process, about your account with RecTrack, you would email permits.dcps@k12.dc.gov. If you have questions about your BUA application, that's going to go to the DGS. Those questions will go to the DGS Realty office. So I think one way to think of it is BUA is for inside spaces, field, obviously, field spaces. That's a great question. Actually, Kira, you might be able to answer this. Does mandated reporter training have to be completed by people going into classrooms on campus for only one time?
No, so the clearance process does not include
Clearances don't, yes.
Yeah, clearances don't, and neither does the mandated reporting.
Okay. But that would mean this person is truly only going on campus one time. If
yeah.
There's a chance they're going to be going even the second time, you know, that threshold changes.
Yeah, like if they work with your organization, like I imagine this is one of those, like a guest speaker, a career day, like that type of engagement with students, that wouldn't require the mandated reporter training. But if this is someone who is regularly working with children or working with your organization, then they would need to complete that training.
I see a question here about the AOM training. I believe if I'm understanding correctly, it says DCPS can assist teachers from a child development center within the school with the medication administration training. If you are, yes, an external provider, your teachers are part of your external organization, then we do help with scheduling that training for your staff. Obviously, that's what you're understanding too. Yeah.
From the CDC, like within the school, so I'm thinking like a UPO. Is that the question?
That's what I'm expecting.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah. There's a question here, are programs allowed online or in person only? Programs are allowed online. The same clearance requirements do apply though. So if you will be interacting virtually with students any more than one time, staff or volunteers do still need to go through the DCPS clearance process.
I'm curious, this is actually a question you could also be helpful on. There's a after school club that has there's an after school photography club, and students get digital cameras and they would potentially be taking pictures of each other. Is there any sort of like additional, though the pictures would not be shared externally, the students keep the cameras after class?
No, I think that's fine. As long as they aren't posting the photos, I think it is best practice to have that release just in case. So I would encourage the student to talk. I'm imagining this is a secondary class, but I would encourage the partner to connect with the student, to ask their parents to go ahead and sign for that media consent, which can be provided online. And it can always be updated as parents talk to their registrars. It's a box that's checked once the consent is given within our Aspen system.
A question about clearances here. This is one that we often get. Is it one time across all schools or just one time per school? It's one time across schools. So if you are going into Elliott Hine once and Hart once, that's 2 times. You need to have the clearance then.
Yes, the district, the clearance is held by the district, not individual schools. So that once you're cleared to work with DCPS from a clearance and background check perspective, you're cleared to work in any school. And it is not one time ever. It's every 2 years.
For the BUA applications, it depends when your official first start date is. It's 20 days prior to that. So if you are getting started day 1 this school year, the last day to submit that application would be at the end of this month, the 27th. Though we certainly encourage you to submit it earlier when possible.
I see a question about security being provided until 6 p.m. That is a policy that is reviewed every year. And so we will, send a communication out if there are any anticipated changes going into the new school year.
I see a question here. It says, is the media release from across the district or only apply to the school signing it? So the student or families will fill out that form for the when enrolling in the school specifically. So that's where you would get that information from. I don't know if that answers your question, but it is, if you were to do like a field trip with students, that's not specifically on site. But that the media release would still apply even if you're not at the school.
I'm wondering if this, for clarity, is the media release form across. So the media release is held with the district, and so the student would only attend one school at a time. But once a student signs, or once a parent signs for their student's media consent, it would apply for the duration of the school year, unless it's rescinded by the parent.
I see a question about if an organization has its own media release. We have some clarifying language that I can include in our follow-up, but we do understand that organizations have, their own media release for their own sort of independent operations that maybe happen, outside of regular programming. But the DCPS media release is what's going to cover operations and programming that are happening with our students on property.
I do see someone with their hand up. Unfortunately, microphones are disabled. So if you want to write out your question in the Q&A, we can answer it there.
A question about security costs. So funny, I just had this discussion with DGS, and the process is that security costs should be split across organizations who are in the same space at the same time. As Katie shared, if you have a question, please put it in that Q&A because we can't disable microphones. If you have a question about students, the status of a student's media release, the school, sometimes the registrar, the business manager, they can access that information. There's a pretty specific question here about serving students with different needs. So I'd be happy to follow up and just talk through the specifics of that. I don't want to sort of answer with a blanket answer because every situation is a little bit different.
A question here about mandated reporter training for virtual programs. Yes, this is still required if you are, considered a school program provider, you're working with students. If a student makes a report to you virtually, you would still be mandated to report that.
Yes, I wanted to follow up just because of the wording of that question. Are they encouraged to do mandated reporter training? It's actually a requirement. It is not an encouragement. If you are going to be working with students anywhere in the District of Columbia, that is a requirement to take the mandated reporter training administered by CFSA.
Yes, all partners will receive an email early next month with directions on how to reconfirm your partnership for next year and take care of that in the database. Katie, can you put our contact information up just so folks have it? I assume folks will start to drop off soon, but if you have other questions, you can always reach out to us. These are sort of broad district level policies, and sometimes there are unique situations or you're wondering how this specifically applies in your case. So please reach out and we're happy to talk through any of these items.
I see a question about annual reporting. So It depends. I know that Learn 24 grantees, it's every 2 years, if I'm not mistaken. For DCPS, it's every 2 years. And so I would just encourage our partners to take it every 2 years to be able to produce that certificate if it's ever asked.
If you have specific questions about security at your program sites, please reach out and we're happy to talk through that. All right, any final questions for us today?
I see one question here about reporting a staff member to the principal. Not sure if you mean a staff member of your program or a DCPS staff member. I would say if that you are reporting anything to the principal regarding things, involving your program or students in your program, then you must also report that to DCPS partnerships through our incident reporting form.
I was not a classroom teacher, so long pauses of silence give me stress. So if there are any other questions, please drop them in the chat. We are also very excited about the move to an online BUA process and online payment. So appreciate your support and patience as that process transitions. And if you are having challenges, you can always reach out to us if need be.
We will share a link to the exit ticket we'll send out the recording and the deck probably early next week, and we'll include the link to the exit ticket in that as well.
So the exit ticket is just a Microsoft form that's linked in the deck, and as Katie said, we'll share that also in our follow-up email next week. We don't have any updates on the AOM training. We plan to follow sort of the same process we followed last year for supporting partners and getting their staff trained. And we'll, send those details probably middle of next month once we have everything from our DCPS health team. All right, well, feel free, if you don't have any other questions, feel free to hop off. We'll stick around for a minute or two to answer anything else that comes off, but Thank you to everyone for joining today. As always, I know we've said this several times, but please don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions or want to clarify anything. We'll be sending the recording and the decks out next week. Really encourage you to share this deck with your program teams, particularly the information on incidents and accommodations. We know that, there are folks spread out across your program sites, and it's really important that everybody be on the same page about this stuff. So feel free to share this widely. Yeah, have a great rest of your day, and thanks for your time.